Off in the salty ocean, off where the waves roll free. The sparkling water rises, then crashes to the sea. Out amongst the breakers, you'll have no need to fear. It's true, it's the blue frontier.
Welcome to the latest Blue News you can use. The Trump administration closed out 2025 by announcing that it received an application for deep-sea mining in international waters from a Canadian startup called the Metals Company. The National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration, or NOAA, immediately announced it will hold public hearings in late January to make sure their application moves forward without, quote, undue delays, unquote. Whoa there, Nellie Bell. I started reporting on deep-sea mining in 1977 because bad ideas promising quick profits never get old. You can review several past interviews on the Rising Tide Ocean podcast to understand why, from an environmental and metals market perspective, deep-sea mining makes little or no sense, and why some 40 nations, including France, Germany, and New Zealand, are calling for a moratorium or ban on it. Meanwhile, granting permits to mine on the high seas, in violation of the UN Law of the Seas Treaty that the U.S. has not signed onto, but in the past has always abided by, may make the United States, along with the seizing of oil tankers and blowing up of suspected drug boats, the latest pirate threat on the high seas. Okay, Nellie Noah, you might as well raise the Jolly Roger now. And that's Blue News you can use. Welcome to another episode of Rising Tide, the Ocean Podcast. This is David Helvarg, and I'm glad to welcome back my co-host, Vicki Nichols Goldstein of the Inland Ocean Coalition, who's been away for a few shows.
And it is great to be here.
And of course, we'd both like to welcome back a past guest of ours, Richard Charter. But now the Trump administration's Department of Interior has announced its latest 5-year offshore oil and gas draft lease plan that, along with opening up Arctic waters off Alaska and the eastern Gulf of Mexico, or Gulf of America, Gulf of Epstein, whatever, also reopened California's entire 1,100-mile coastline to drilling, despite polls showing over 70% of California citizens oppose this. Well, Trump clearly enjoys baiting California, love-bombing big oil, and attacking clean energy and its 400,000 plus workers. There are at least 3 reasons this latest leasing plan won't work, and we'll get into them. But first, Richard, Vicki asked me a question the other day, and I don't think we've discussed it before. With all the critical issues facing our public seas, why or how did you choose to focus much of your life's career on ending offshore drilling?
Thank you for having me. And that question has to do with my father, who used to love to go gather abalone on the Northern California coast. And when I was just a little tiny kid, I got parked either in the tide pools or in the estuaries. So I fell in love with the Northern California coast very early in my life. As a small child, I was a mad scientist. I had a chemistry lab in my room that contained things that you probably could not buy today. And I went to college to major in geology, and at the last minute changed my thinking to chemical engineering. But while in college, segued through industrial design and wound up majoring in fine arts. So I had a company producing posters that were distributed all over the world. And I figured I would tie the small amount of my work to progressive environmental causes. And I did that, and it turned into what I did. At the time, I was doing silkscreen glass, layers of glass with silkscreen images on them. And I found out that Jimmy Carter's Secretary of Interior, Cecil Andrus, was going to drill right in front of my house at the coast, literally. I thought, well, I could just do a few brochures and let people know about this. And 6 months later, we had a small NGO called Friends of the Coast with a board of directors and nonprofit status. And the printer who was doing our flyer went out in the parking lot and ran 3 times as many flyers as he was supposed to. And we put them out on storefront counters, and we stopped a project called Lease Sale 53. I was happily retired and had quit environmental work altogether.
And big oil brought you back.
It's almost like this bipartisan desire to ruin the California coast. I mean, you're talking about Jimmy Carter, and then we had Ronald Reagan in the 80s, and then the early Obama administration, they tried to open it up again. And with Trump, of course, you thought you were at a stage where we were going to have a moratorium on offshore drilling. No?
Well, on January 6th, 2025, Joe Biden issued two executive orders that put the entire California coast and some other areas under a permanent offshore drilling moratorium. And we do have five national marine sanctuaries along this coast. So the question became, maybe now I could just rest easily and everything would be fine. And then, of course, we saw the Trump administration launch what really can only be characterized as a battle against the living environment. The Trump administration chose Thanksgiving to announce a 5-year offshore drilling plan, which contains a total of 6 separate offshore lease sales off of California, 3 off of Southern California, 2 off of Central California, and then 1 for the first time off of Northern California, off of Mendocino, Humboldt, and Del Norte County. So they're taking the whole coast, Central and Southern California. It's a redundant program, and they're serious. I mean, this is not, a hypothetical thing. This is real, with a written comment period that runs only until January 23rd. So they're taking advantage of the holiday season when people are busy to try to keep them from commenting. And the bottom line is, if we do nothing, if enough people sit on the sidelines, this will happen.
Because we have so many miles protected under the National Marine Sanctuaries Protection Act off the coast of California, which prohibits oil and gas drilling. How do these protections fit in with Trump's goal of opening up the coast? What will he have to do in order to work around that National Marine Sanctuaries Act?
Well, as I read the draft proposed program, the 149-page document that Interior put out when they announced targeting California and Alaska and the Gulf, Atlantic coast was taken out primarily because Republicans on the Atlantic coast went directly to the White House and said, don't do it. So California is the target. And we do have 4 national marine sanctuaries here. And as I read the 149-page draft proposed offshore leasing plan, it makes virtually no mention of avoiding national marine sanctuaries. They're just pretending that sanctuaries don't exist. It's as if they don't realize that each sanctuary has a designation document, a management plan, a set of regulations, all 3 of which preclude any disturbance of the seafloor. And all of the sanctuaries have what's called enter and injure. If pollution originates outside of the sanctuary and drifts in on the currents, there's a per diem fine. It's a very draconian provision. And all of the sanctuaries mirror each other. And they also all incorporate major federal environmental laws like NEPA and ESA, Marine Mammal Protection Act, Endangered Species Act. All of those things are mirrored in the sanctuaries. And all those things are under attack in Congress. But if Congress takes them away, they will still exist in the sanctuaries.
So let me ask, I talked about 3 reasons this leasing doesn't make sense. One of them is the laws. You've got the Marine Sanctuary Law. You have the Biden administration executive director that's also being ignored. Isn't there a requirement in the law for leasing for public hearings? And those aren't being called by Department of Interior. People are sort of calling their own public hearings.
Well, there are a few things missing from the draft proposed program document. One is public hearings. The local communities are partnering with their local conservation community to do their own hearings.
So I still want to go back because I'm not really clear on what the administration needs to do in order to open it up when you already have these national marine sanctuary protections and those regulations. I'm just missing that piece. Tell me more.
That's a very good question. A lot of people are asking that question. The first thing Interior did was shortly after the Trump administration took office, a number of the most knowledgeable, experienced staff persons at National Marine Sanctuary were presented with the option of taking early retirement by DOJ. And they were basically told, if you can't go along with the Trump program, you should retire. And so a whole roomful of the best people at NOAA governing the National Marine Sanctuaries left, departed, they're gone. doing other things by now. And so first you have a house cleaning. You get rid of the institutional memory. And then you start analyzing the sanctuaries for how you might invade that space because they are permanently protected from offshore drilling. And this administration is approaching this from the standpoint of maybe we could slant drill, directionally drill under marine sanctuaries from just outside the boundary.
Got
That
it.
will never work because actually it's established law that marine sanctuary boundaries extend to the middle of the earth, to the center of the planet. So directional drilling is illegal, but they're still going to try it, we think, at the northern end of the Channel Islands Marine Sanctuary first, drilling outside the boundary into the sanctuary.
Now, there's another law which says, or part of the leasing laws, they have to have an environmental study. And since 1980, that was under the National Environmental Protection Act, which is one of the keystone environmental laws they're trying to
There
get
you
rid
go.
of now. So it seems like forgetting market forces and uncertainty in the economy, there's just a slew of laws that they seem to be undermining here.
It's ironic to me that the environmental laws that the Trump administration and the MAGA movement in Congress are trying to undo, some of those laws were created by Richard Nixon.
Hmm.
Because why? Because he went to the 1969 Santa Barbara blowout personally, stood on the beach, saw what was happening, shiny shoes covered with oil, and he declared that there would be an oil-free, never drill zone in front of the city of Santa Barbara called the Hickle Preserve. It's still there. That was the first real executive order that set an area aside permanently from drilling. And he went home and started the Environmental Protection Agency, and most of the major environmental laws that we have today are a result of Richard Nixon going to the Santa Barbara blowout, along with, Rachel Carson writing Silent Spring and the Cuyahoga River in Ohio catching fire a couple times. This is the birthplace of the modern day environmental movement was Republican.
That's
And
for
now the
sure.
Trump administration is trying to undo it after half a century.
We're talking about Trump's love bombing the oil industry, but even the oil industry is getting nervous. It's $60 a barrel now. It's projected to drop to $50 a barrel and throughout 2026. Does the oil industry really want to try and drill off California at this point?
It depends on timing. The oil industry has about a 40-year planning horizon, and they have been trying. The industry has been attempting to acquire leases off of California since, like I say, 1978, and they have not been able to do so. These leases never expire. You basically have an opportunity, I think now, if you're an oil exec, to grab stuff off of California, sit on it, and they sell these to each other. It's like a trading stamp, room full of trading stamps, and you will have this lease forever. Once industry acquires leases off this coast, the first thing that will happen, the first thing you'll see is seismic airgun testing because they've got to have better data, even to bid. And so you have large ships towing a cable array with a bunch of acoustic transponders following a ship that has basically a blast set off in the water by an air gun. Used to use dynamite, but the air gun spark is actually louder and more precipitous than a dynamite. And so the last data that was gathered for the California coast was in the 1960s for seismic surveys to understand the seabed and where there might or might not be oil. It
And
has to
what does
happen
that do
before
to marine wildlife? I mean, why is that a problem?
everything in the ocean communicates primarily by sound, and the whales in Lahaina in Hawaii are communicating with whales coming back from Alaska halfway through the trip. And so there's a possibility that certain marine mammals will completely lose their ability to communicate. The first thing that happens with seismic surveys, once the notice is out, actually is that the fishing industry completely leaves the area because you can't do commercial fishing when this is going on. There's a space use conflict of this huge cable and these giant ships. And the fact is that the fish all leave the area too for weeks and weeks after the activity.
What is rising tide? Rising Tide is Blue Frontier's bi-weekly half-hour show that features a diversity of ocean voices from the famous to the fascinating, deep-sea explorers to whale wranglers, Arctic residents to climate justice warriors. With public broadcasting under attack, Blue Frontier offers Rising Tide and all associated content for free to community and public radio stations across the nation. We need your support to keep producing our salty, in-depth conversations. A tax-deductible donation at bluefront.org will help us keep getting the word out about our awesome blue planet. And now, back to the show.
What's the economic perspective for communities if the inevitable spilling follows the drilling?
Well, local communities, of course, along the California coast, with whom I'm now working again directly, a lot of them have their own local policies. They have climate policies. They are moving things like city buses and transportation network away from oil, even away from natural gas. Electric buses are the thing. And all that's being ignored by Interior. And of course, San Diego is the birthplace of what's called the blue economy. The idea that there are technologies coming along that depend upon a clean coast. You get to Orange County, and the visitor serving industry is the core of the economy.
In Florida, you have bipartisan, you've got Republicans and Democrats working together to try to protect Florida's coast. Certainly in California, we know that Democrats are leading the way. Are you finding partnerships with Republicans to protect areas of California? How does Florida and California compare in this East Coast, West Coast battle?
You've been listening to my phone calls. Every member of the Florida congressional delegation has now gone to the White House in a letter and said, not off of Florida. There has been a longstanding alliance between California and Florida working on the annual moratorium. Well, we had to renew every year for 27 years, 1 year at a time, a prohibition on Interior spending money for leasing off California. We did Florida at the same time for most of those years. So there is an alliance existing between California and Florida. And obviously, now that the Atlantic is out of the picture because of their political reprieve, California and Florida and the lower 48 are the name of the game. And of course, in Florida, they have a closer memory. We had a couple of smaller oil spills here in California originating from offshore drilling. But in Florida, they had tar balls washing up on the beaches of Pensacola the size of a refrigerator. And that lasted, they had tar balls on the beaches of Pensacola for at least a year after the Deepwater Horizon, and they still get some tar balls in their beach at Pensacola. So Florida has the trauma, what we call post-traumatic ocean syndrome of the Deepwater Horizon. They are in no mood to have drilling off of Florida.
So we just forget on the California coast, the Republicans from the previous spills?
I don't think we forget. I think we have, first of all, we've had congressional redistricting that has reconfigured particularly Northern California. We now have a district that extends all the way to the Nevada border. So the coast of Nevada is in, Arcata now. And if this redistricting in California, as many people think it might, causes the House of Representatives to flip so that we don't have this triumvirate of Republican control of the U.S. Senate, the U.S. House, and the White House, which is what's causing all this problem. This is like a short circuit. This is like putting a fork in a toaster. It's causing a short circuit. So the bottom line is, if we take back the House, and I think that would give us at least the hope of being able to somehow protect the California coast from what Trump is trying to do to us.
Or at least point out the many laws that are being broken in this proposed lease sale.
The laws that are being broken, I actually made a list of them yesterday, and it was about a half a page, just abbreviations. This, whatever happens in the political arena, would appear to inevitably lead to litigation. And the litigation, you're talking about a decade or more. And of course, that would buy time for a changing of the guard in Washington, where you might not have to deal with a Trump administration and a Republican Senate and a Republican House, you might be able to actually change who's in charge and get back to some kind of reasonable accommodation of the local economies. Local governments are guaranteed a place at the table under the Outer Continental Shelf Lands Act, and they intend to claim that place at the table.
Who's likely to do or submit the lawsuits? Are you
Uh,
working on that
too
now
early,
with
too
folks?
early to tell. Gavin Newsom, of course, when this announcement was out on Thanksgiving, he was at a climate conference in Brazil, and his reaction was dead on arrival to the 5-year leasing program. Obviously, the governor of an affected state is the most powerful voice in this type of debate because under the OCS Lands Act, the Secretary of Interior must respond and accommodate the concerns of a governor of an affected state and may respond to and accommodate the concerns of local governments, local communities. But I would expect that this will be a seamless alliance between the governor and the local communities in most places to deal with this. So I can't predict when or how a lawsuit might originate. What we're doing right now is we're building the legal record during this comment period that ends on January 23rd. The counties of Humboldt, Mendocino, Sonoma, Marin, and Santa Cruz and the city of Santa Cruz have all already passed their own resolutions opposing offshore drilling and joining this coalition.
We're talking about protecting California's coast. What's interesting, the U.S. is also developing a fourth blue water coast as the ice recedes in the Arctic. I'm just reading where even Alaska Republicans are getting very nervous about drilling in Arctic waters. What can you say about that?
Well, the draft 5-year leasing plan includes virtually every planning area off of Alaska. The big, beautiful bill included some Pacific lease sales in Cook Inlet, as in front of Anchorage. But the bottom line is we know for a fact that you cannot clean up spilled oil among broken sea ice or in most of the meteorological conditions that prevail off of Alaska. So we've seen normally pro-petroleum senators, particularly in Alaska, say that they want to protect the high Arctic and the northern planning areas, Chukchi and so we're looking at new voices at the table, if you will, particularly in Alaska, as we saw off the Atlantic coast. Here in California, we have some notably quiet Republicans, but they may be owned and operated by the oil industry. We're going to find out.
Mm. What kind of ideal strategies and alliances are you hoping to pull together? Can we anticipate strong voices of the ocean industry coming together?
The fishing industry is very accustomed to working together in a unified way in the various regions of the country to protect their own interests, and they have done a great job of that, and they've been very much at the table all through the offshore drilling pipe. We also have a business alliance, which has said, I forget how many businesses were on the last letter, but there is both a West Coast and an East Coast business alliance, very diverse, very many different kinds of businesses. And so we're seeing basically a connectivity between these groups, between fishermen, businesses, and the community leaders. And where it's possible for a local community to actually take action on its own, it will. We have 27 here in California, 27 different communities have adopted what are called onshore facilities ordinances, which cause, the county and the city control land use in their jurisdiction. So 27 of them have said, we're rolling up the welcome mat. You can't come ashore. You won't build an onshore facility to either stage or later process oil and gas offshore. And this, I think, has a chilling effect on the bidding on a lease sale, because if you're never going to be able to get to shore, what the heck are you want to attract off of that community for?
You're 50 years into this. How hopeful are you for eventually getting beyond offshore and onshore oil and onto clean energy and a better future?
I think this is the last gasp of petroleum. What we're seeing is an industry that largely funded the Trump campaign getting paid back for the money they invested. And it's not just the offshore leasing is part of it, but you have an administration that has declared, thrown up their hands and said, we have a national energy emergency. How can you call it a national energy emergency when the policy of the same administration that called that emergency is killing wind farms right and left, including one that was 80% built? So if we are really going to have an energy emergency, then we logically should at least think about all of the above, as it's been called. But all of the above is not a phrase you're hearing from this administration. It's only about drill, baby, drill. It's a stupid analogy to say we have an energy emergency. We have to only drill, but let's get rid of all renewables, solar, wind, and kill those.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense.
Doesn't make sense.
So, Richard, for people who are not on the coast, what can they do? You've got this comment period. People who aren't necessarily on those particular coastal areas, I think many people don't want to see this happen throughout the entire United States. Give us some next steps.
Because of the global implications of what's being proposed, we have set up a website to make it very easy for people to comment. It's at savemycoast.org, savemycoast.org. It is 2 clicks, and you can submit a comment. And there's a draft comment you could use, although we encourage people to, what is your own thought? Where is your own favorite place? What do you know about your location?
So no spilling, no drilling. The ocean's rising, but so are we. No kings. And if you want more, saveourcoast.org.
My coast. Save my coast.
Save my coast.
Save my coast.
My coast, as in your own personal coast.
Yes.
SaveMyCoast.org.
I love it. Richard Charter, oh my gosh, you have been at this for 50-ish years and such a hero. Richard Charter, Director of Local Government, Outer Continental Shelf Coordination Program, is now leading the charge to protect our coast and stop offshore oil. So thank you so much for all of your passion and energy. And
we're all going to do this together.
And
for joining us on the Rising Tide Ocean Podcast. Thank you for joining us on the Rising Tide Ocean Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen, and leave us a review or share it with your friends and other ocean lovers. Follow us on Instagram and visit bluefront.org for more updates and additional resources. Rising Tide is a production of Blue Frontier, co-hosted by David Helvarg and me, Vicki Nichols Goldstein of the Inland Ocean Coalition, with production support from Holden Hardcastle of Fluid Studios, Natasha Benjamin, and Nick Paz, and editing services provided by Charles Landon of Studio Cape May. Thanks for listening, and until next time, stay hopeful and stay salty.
Off in the salty ocean, off where the waves roll free. The sparkling water rises, then crashes to the sea. Out amongst the breakers, you'll have no need to fear. It's true, it's the blue frontier. Off in the salty ocean, off to the blue frontier.
Sparky, come here, buddy. Sparky! There you are. Good boy, Sparky.